forestry, ensuring environmental stewardship, establishing reasonable growth areas, and maintaining our rural character. The plan addresses and amplifies the vision statement above, and it has 8 supporting goals, half of which are explicitly about history and preservation. And 2 of the other 4 goals are about compatibility and quality new development. I looked at this and I said, wow. And you, as the citizens and residents of Louisa, can be the judges of whether or not that's the case here, and how you can further preservation using those goals. Implementation of Louisa 2040 could include retaining and rehabilitating more historic properties for new active uses. We all know that much of our state's affordable housing is historic, in most cases listed in or at least eligible for listing in our state and national registers. That makes them eligible for using certified historic preservation tax credits. But much of this housing is naturally occurring affordability. Sometimes it's only affordable because of years of neglect and decline. But we know there are many examples, and you've seen some here today, of housing projects that have used federal tax credits to improve or initiate affordable housing for seniors and others in historic buildings and complexes. They're phantasmas, ghosts here, I think. Tourism, of course, is a natural for Louisa, and given your excellent transportation connectivity and proximity to larger population centers and your recreational opportunities, all of this occurs here in your historic and scenic rural county. We all became accustomed in the last year to hearing the word infrastructure, and we know that infrastructure projects will be very much part of our lives, probably for the foreseeable future. And we need, as preservationists, as historians, to thoughtfully consider how and where and if utility corridors, massive data centers, new and expanded road construction, and now solar farms, how they all fit in to our already threatened rural landscapes. We need to continue to work in productive and proactive coalitions to plan infrastructure projects in ways that are equitable and just, because they weren't always in the past, and that they meet 21st century needs in responsible and innovative ways so that countryside and cultural and scenic values are considered from the very beginning. So Louisa has all the preservation pieces. And you have a 1990s preservation strategy as an outline that you can update and pursue with local partners and allies. You also have a basic inventory that can be updated with GIS and digital and drone photography and other modern techniques that were certainly unavailable to us 3 decades ago. It would be a challenge to do this, but it would be worth doing in a county with such remarkable resources and talent. I'm sure that your lives, like mine, intersect with many of the places and projects I've touched on today. The award-winning projects and people are inspiring, they're innovative, and they're issue-oriented. And my heart is filled with gratitude for the work that they do and the work that you're doing here in Louisa County. And I'm pleased and proud of all the PIMBYs, preservation in my backyard, who are leading the way in preserving Virginia. Thank you for inviting me back to Louisa County today.
So if you don't mind, I think we'll continue on to a short, I think we'll do a 5-10 minute maximum here of question and answer period. If you wouldn't mind taking some questions.
Oh, that's fine.
So just raise your hand, and do we have a second microphone? No, okay, that's fine. I can amplify your question if it's not quite loud enough for us to hear up here, but we have 5-10 minutes where just throw up your hand and we'll get you.
Is this a situation where the students get even with the professor?
I think so.
No comment. Deb over there.
Are there grant funds available for this type of work, like the GPS sounded very interesting, you know?
Well, but, you know, there are always the cost-sharing programs through the Department of Historic Resources, matching funds between local governments and jurisdictions with state funds. We're all waiting, kind of with bated breath, to see what the BIPOC Fund, the Black and Indigenous People of Color Fund, will bring about. Those standards, I think, and deadlines will start rolling out and being publicized in the spring. And many communities have been, successful in looking for their own private funding from philanthropists such as Mr. Rubenstein talked about, and local foundations, organizations, industry. I think industrial leaders are starting to realize that it's good to know where natural and historic and cultural resources are, because it saves money in the long run if you know where they are, so that you can avoid them or you can mitigate impacts.
Thank you.
Questions?
I guess I have a question. Can you make a comment about the relationship between the conservation community and the preservation community? Is there enough of a dialogue happening between the two communities?
We have a long-standing dialogue and cooperation, coordination between us. My view is we're all the same thing. And there are times when the environmental community takes the lead, and there are times when the preservation community takes the lead. I think we can accomplish more when we work together. We don't always agree, and particularly now in a time of renewable energy, we don't always agree on solar farms or wind energy, for example. Doesn't mean preservationists are against it, but maybe they want it somewhere else, or maybe, there's certain guidelines. In fact, we worked with the Battlefield Trust and other environmental groups at Preservation Virginia to come up with some basic standards for how solar farms could be incorporated into the rural landscape. It was kind of a quick study, and it needs to be redone and updated using the knowledge that we have now. I think in Southside Virginia, people are projecting that there will be more acres in solar farm than there would be in tobacco farm. So these are things we're all learning about, and we do need to work together. I see us as one big movement, and a diversity of opinion within that movement as exists in many sectors.
Thank you.
Vernon? There's a limited number of Rosenwald schools remaining in Louisa County. Shady Grove School, Preservation Virginia was involved with that. Is Preservation Virginia looking at trying to restore some of the other buildings that's still standing?
It's rare that we actually restore a building that's not one of our properties, because we are, I'm just going to say, saddled with historic properties from the 18th and 19th centuries, even the 17th, going back to Jamestown. So we usually do those efforts in our own properties, which we hope serve as models for technology, preservation planning, tourism, and so forth. But what we have done is place Rosenwald schools as a category on our most endangered list. One of them, Pine Grove in Cumberland County, also was named to the National Trust most endangered list because it's threatened by a landfill in 2021. Preservation Virginia has been working with them, providing a lot of technical assistance, as has the University of Virginia Law School. I have done some work for them pro bono. My students, Ethan was in a class where some students worked on that, and the year before other students worked on that. So a lot of what Preservation Virginia is doing for Rosenwald schools and other categories that come through our most endangered list is to help network, to raise profile, to try to have earned media. For example, a school in Caroline County that we've been assisting, and I don't think it's really a Rosenwald school, but it's an African American rural school. It was on ABC's Good Morning America, and people who were not even from Virginia started writing to see how they could help with this school in Caroline County. So a lot of it is about publicity, networking, and looking for where there are funds. What we hope is that this BIPOC fund will really address particularly rural African American schools and churches that have really been allowed to go into decline and that haven't had adequate recognition through the years.
And I would add that Jody Lehendro, the
Yes.
former UVA preservation architect, right over the border between Albemarle and Cobham, consulted with St. John's Rosenwald School in its rehabilitation that is still ongoing, I believe. And he's also consulted with the folks at the Mount Philippi Church, who are stewards of the Cuckoo School, African-American school over to east of here.
And in addition to our other staff, we've recently been able to add Dr. Lisa Wynn Bryant, who has a PhD in African American Studies, as one of our outreach people at Preservation Virginia, and she's expected to be very active in this arena. We're also having 3 African American preservation fellows join us later this year in a program that was funded by the Jesse Ball DuPont Foundation. So lots is happening in that arena, but we're very hopeful that the new fund will offer some bricks and mortar money as well as planning and survey money. So again, it's kind of stay tuned and get publicity.
Any additional questions? Crystal?
To modernize the Louisa project, 30 years later, what would be like the top 3 directions you would take with that?
Well, I guess, the very first thing is to review the 1990 work. Obviously, some of those properties have been altered substantially. Some buildings no longer exist. Some may have been plowed under. Some may have become industrial or subdivision development. That would be one thing. Another would be to work with Department of Historic Resources to see what sort of assistance and funding they would give you. There's so many techniques we could use today in terms of aerial photography that would make the process easier. Computerizing all of it, having software that you could use as your database. There are just so many things that can happen to update that 1990s study. But I think the first thing is to go back out there and see what's there. And some of that can be done with aerial reconnaissance.
Like drones?
Yes, and available aerial photography that the county may have.